What's going on, guys? It's New York Prepper here, and I have a very important video to discuss with you guys about something that a lot of preppers overlook when they're planning their bug out locations and retreat locations, areas that they can escape to if there's an SHTF situation, WROL, the end of the world as we know it, Teotihuacan, the apocalypse, whatever. Doesn't have to be the apocalypse. It could just be a temporary disaster like a hurricane or a natural disaster, terrorism, regional problems, regional issues like rioting, civil unrest, large-scale power outages, things like that. A lot of people, they plan to have a bug out location, and typically those bug out locations tend to be in rural areas, in very secluded areas, because people generally want to get away from major population centers like New York City, Boston, DC, Philadelphia, the entire I-95 corridor, the West Coast, Portland, Seattle, LA, San Francisco, the big Florida cities. People generally want to get away from big cities, and they want to flee and go to very rural, remote locations where they usually have some type of land or a cabin or a vacation home. It's a very common thing that a lot of preppers do, and it's called a bug out location. And I want to just discuss a threat that a lot of preppers overlook and don't really think about, all right, when they're buying these bug out locations. And they're buying land and they want to build on that land, or even if they just buy a parcel of land and they plan to drop a trailer on it, like a camper, an RV, and drive up there in an RV and just live in the RV and set up security perimeters around that RV. And one thing that a lot of preppers overlook is people generally think that all the crime and the bad people are going to be in the urban areas. So that's why they want to escape from the cities, escape from the suburban areas or the immediate surrounding areas around cities. They think that the urban areas are going to be the most dangerous, and there's going to be the most conflict there. There's going to be gangs, there's going to be marauders, raiders, looters, rioters, pillagers, criminals. And to a certain extent, that's very true. A big city like New York, 10 million people, even if you have 10% of those people turning into criminals after SHTF, that's 1 million criminals running around. That's a lot of bad elements to deal with. But rural areas also have criminals, and they also have bad people. All right, a lot of people think that, you go out to the country and it's all sunshine and rainbows, and it's not always the case. A lot of rural areas are beautiful, and, there's very nice small towns across this country that are thriving and doing well. But for every beautiful small town and small farming town, you're going to have some bad elements in those towns. It doesn't matter what town it is. And I'm speaking to you guys as a country boy myself. Me living in the country, I can speak from my personal life experience. I live in what you would consider to be a nice small town. Most people here are middle class. They're not in poverty. They're not, breaking laws and doing anything bad. Most people in the area that I live are just your typical Americans, middle-class Americans, but not too far away from me. There's areas where there's trailer parks, where there's all kinds of bad people, bad neighborhoods, bad areas, not too far away. Now, is that to say that every, rural area is going to be filled with, backwoods, people like that? No, there's a lot of rural people, country folks like myself that are middle class, and we obey the laws. we won't have a problem with you coming through our town if you're going to be bugging out to my area, for example, and you're from New York City and you come up here. I don't have a problem with you as long as you're not an asshole. And I think that's how a lot of country people feel. But there's the bad elements in these areas, in the rural areas. You're also going to have to deal with criminals in the rural areas. You're going to have to deal with meth heads, heroin, drug growers in a lot of rural areas. You have a lot of people that grow different types of drugs because it's isolated from law enforcement, so they can grow and create drugs. For example, meth labs, marijuana growers, even some people grow all kinds of different drugs in the forests because it's isolated and they know law enforcement is not going to catch them. Meth labs, things like that. Meth labs have become very common across the United States, particularly in the eastern United States, in Appalachia and places that are very poor and have high poverty rates. That's where you're going to see a lot of meth labs, a lot of drugs, heroin. Drug dealers are going to set up shop in poor areas. And you're going to have to deal with these people if you're bugging out to a rural area. And I actually had a subscriber of mine that told me that they had land in Ohio and they lived in Florida and they wanted to bug out to Ohio from Florida. And I told them that, you're going to have to cross through some very poor areas of Appalachia, eastern Kentucky, eastern Tennessee, West Virginia. Those areas have poverty rates that exceed 20, 30, 40%. Okay, 20 to 40% of the people there are living below the poverty line. And actually, I think the state of West Virginia still has the highest poverty rate in the entire country. Does that mean that people in those areas are bad? No, it's not what I'm trying to say. What I'm saying is that when you're going through areas like that, if you're on your way to a bug out location and you're driving down back roads, there's a chance that you may get jumped and ambushed, by some backwoods people, meth labs, drug dealers, drug growers. There's all kinds of people that live in rural areas. They're not all just good, country bumpkins, that go to church every weekend and, obey laws. A lot of them go to rural areas to escape society. So you have different types. You have your crazies that try to escape society because they're mentally ill and, they don't want to be a part of society anymore. So they go into the backwoods to be alone and isolated from society. Like, for example, Ted Kaczynski and a lot of those people in Idaho back in the 90s. A lot of people in Alaska do the same thing. So you got to deal with those types of people. Different types of fanatical groups will often go to extremely rural, isolated locations. It's been known for a long time that the white supremacists have a lot of activity in northern Idaho, which is a very isolated part of the country. And the reason for that is because they feel safer in those isolated areas. They're far away from law enforcement. Some of them could even be fugitives. They could have criminal records. They could have committed a crime. They could have even robbed a bank or killed someone. And then they flee to very rural areas because they know that it's going to be hard for law enforcement to track them down in rural areas because you have lower population density. You have less places where people can see them. Even if somebody's wanted, let's say somebody's wanted for robbing a bank, or a group of people are wanted for robbing a bank or for selling drugs or for killing someone. A lot of those people will flee to rural areas because they feel that it's going to be harder to be tracked down in rural areas, which is true. There's less cameras, there's less people. So you have to watch out. If you have a bug out location in a rural area, don't just think that it's better than the city, and go in there with this fantasy mindset that everybody in the country is awesome and everybody's going to welcome you with open arms, and that there's no bad people in the country, that all the bad people are in the city. And once you escape from the city or close to the city, then you're going to be safe once you're out in the country. And that's not necessarily the case, and that's kind of the overlooked area that I want to bust this whole idea that people have, that I'm going to escape the city, I'm going to go to a rural area, and everything is going to be fine. I'm not going to have to worry about anything anymore because I'm far away from people. And that's the common misconception that a lot of preppers have, especially preppers that live in cities or suburbs. They have this thought that, I'm going to get a bug out location in, whatever secluded area, and it's going to be so awesome, but you have to also have your guard up in those areas. Just because you may not have to deal with Bloods and Crips when you're in West Virginia or Montana or Alaska or the Adirondack Mountains of New York, or whatever secluded area around the country. Yeah, you're not going to have to deal with Bloods and Crips or rioters and things like that, but you're going to have to deal with some possible crazies, wanted people, meth heads, and meth lab rings, and a lot of the meth growers are very violent people. And again, if the grid goes down and society breaks down, there's no law and order anymore, those types of people are going to be very highly likely to commit more crimes. They already have violent tendencies. They already have a criminal mind, where they have no remorse for people. That's why they're making meth and selling meth, because they have no remorse for others. So it's going to be very easy for them to commit acts of violence and all do all kinds of things to people, especially if they're desperate, if they're hungry, and they see you, passing through their town, and you have a loaded down vehicle filled with preps, and you're on your way to your bug out location, and they say, "Oh wow, look at this city boy. He's got a vehicle full of preps, and his wife is pretty good looking. Let's stop them, and let's bother them and do all kinds of things to them." These are things that you have to think about. All right. And the problem is that a lot of these people in the backwoods, a lot of them grew up in those areas. They know how to shoot. They grew up around firearms. So, they know the land, they know the terrain. So they're a difficult enemy. They know their surroundings. You're on their home turf, and you're going through their home turf. So they have an advantage over you, unless you're very skilled with firearms and you're a very good survivalist. A lot of those guys, even though they're meth heads or crazies or wanted, if they grew up in the backwoods, chances are they know how to survive in the woods. They know how to hunt and they know how to shoot, even if they live a life of crime. So they could potentially be a difficult adversary to deal with, versus your local gang in the city, where most of those guys don't know how to shoot. They hold pistols sideways. They work more on intimidation than anything else. All right. So you should not underestimate that threat, and you shouldn't overlook it. And if you're planning a bug out route, if let's say you want to escape, like my subscriber was asking me, how to get from Florida to Ohio, if you're planning a bug out route, and you have to go through some really backwoods areas, very secluded areas, you have to really think hard about where you're going to go and how you're going to plan your bug out route, because, country roads are great, because country roads, you're not going to see a lot of other people, you're not going to have a lot of people in the city on the same road as you, especially like very deep woods, back roads, but they're also choke points, so all it takes is, let's say a group of meth heads, they want to roadblock a particular road that goes through their area, and they want to shake people down and take their stuff and maybe rape some women. I mean, who knows? A lot of them are going to be doped up on meth. They're going to be mentally crazy. Meth heads are not all there. A lot of them are totally insane. It's very easy for them to perform ambushes in those very backwoods, deep woods areas, because the road is, it's dark. Let's say you're driving at night and you're bugging out. You're going through some very secluded mountainous terrain. It's dark outside. You got woods all around you. These guys can literally throw a spike strip out in front of the road, flatten your tires, and you're not going to see the spike strip until it's too late, especially if you're driving at night. They could throw caltrops on the road, which are literally just bent nails that are welded together so they stand upright and there's a sharp nail sticking out. You can drive over that and you're going to destroy your tires. Then they're going to come out from the woods, surround your vehicle, and from there you're at their mercy. They could do whatever they want at that point. Even if you have a lot of firepower, if you have 5 or 10 guys that surround your vehicle and it's just you and your wife and the kids, you're in a bad situation there. So I would think very strongly about going through secluded areas if you're going to have a bug out route, and really plan your route carefully so you avoid some of the really poverty-stricken areas, particularly in like Appalachia. I have nothing against people from there, but areas that have a lot more poverty tend to have more drugs and more crime and more criminals and more criminal activity. So you want to try to avoid those types of areas as much as possible. You have to do a lot of research about your bug out route. Try to avoid, choke points. Do research on what towns you're driving through. If you drive through a town that's more poverty stricken and maybe had a few meth labs that were busted, definitely don't want to drive through that town or anywhere near it. You want to drive through maybe towns that are more middle class, where they don't have, a history of meth heads and crazies and extremist, groups like white supremacists and stuff like that. You want to avoid those areas. Do your research, because you don't want to be in a situation where you're ambushed, and it's very easy to do on a rural road, a backcountry road. It's very easy to ambush somebody. All you got to do is throw some spike strips out that you can make by yourself. These guys could literally make it in their garage in 1 hour. They can make spike strips and lay them out, wait for somebody to drive through, and then they just pop out of the woods and surround your car. And you have no help. There's nobody around for miles. There's no police to help you. There's no cell signal. And obviously if it's SHTF, then the grid will be down anyway, so forget about cell phones. But, my point is that, just because you're going out into the country, doesn't mean that you're totally escaping the criminal elements. Like I said, a lot of country areas have their share of problems. There's a lot of poor people that live in country areas. You have a lot of meth labs, all kinds of, heroin, and, you have crazy people, extremist groups, cults. A lot of them go out to the country areas to escape society and get away from law enforcement, wanted people. So you got to think about those things, all right? Don't just think that, all right, I'm in the country and everything is fine. I made it out of the city, and now that I'm out of the city, everything is fine. It doesn't work that way. My advice to you guys would be to plan your bug out route carefully. Like I said, research the areas you're passing through. Try to avoid very isolated roads if you can. If you can stay more on like a highway or maybe like a larger road where there's more traffic going through, you're better off, even if it's a SHTF, you're better off doing that than going into like a isolated backwoods road, because that's where, even some local punks that just want to mess with people and steal their stuff could set up roadblocks and ambushes. So that's my suggestion. Stay to more traveled routes. You don't have to go on like a major interstate, but stay away from like backwoods roads and dirt roads and stuff. You know, you don't have to get that crazy and go into those really deep woods areas if you're bugging out. You know, you can stay on secondary roads and primary roads, you know, as long as they're not like highways and major interstates. If you can find like some county roads that are fairly well traveled, those are going to be better options for you, in my opinion. And obviously you need to also learn about ambushing tactics and how to respond to an ambush if you are ambushed. You need to have some basic tactical training and tactical understanding of how ambushes are performed. And, you know, obviously you want to avoid choke points. That's the first thing to do. And going on a backwoods road, you know, in the middle of nowhere is an obvious choke point. You want to avoid, you know, curvy roads where somebody could set up an ambush around a curve. And once you're rounding the curve, the ambush is waiting for you on the other side of the curve. And by the time you realize that the ambush is there, it's going to be too late because you rounded the curve. You can't see what's on the other side of the turn. And when you try to reverse and turn around, one of the ambush elements is behind you and they box you in. All right, so curvy roads are bad. You know, nice straight roads are good. You know, avoiding areas that are very secluded with a lot of forests on the side of the roads where somebody could be waiting for you and like I said, pop out of the woods and try to ambush you. Avoid those types of areas. You know, nice open areas with two-lane roads, two-lane highways is, in my opinion, is better. You know, and so obviously learn how to shoot, you know, learn how to react to an ambush. There's different ways to counterattack an ambush. I'm not going to really go too detailed into that in this video. I just want to kind of give you guys something to think about. You know, so you need to do your own research and, you know, learn about tactics. I'll do some more tactics videos on how to respond to an ambush, but there's different ways to do it. And you can read about how to do that on the internet. There's lots of information about that. So that's pretty much it, guys. I hope you found this video useful. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, subscribe, hit the thumbs up button, and don't forget to visit my website, www.newyorkprepper.com. And you should sign up to the forum. You can register for the discussion forum where you can discuss this topic and other topics with other like-minded individuals outside of the YouTube platform. And also you can subscribe to a newsletter through my website. If you want to get breaking news updates in your email, subscribe on the bottom of my homepage. You scroll to the bottom, you'll see a subscribe box, and you can subscribe, and I'll send out any kind of really major breaking news updates through the email. The last email I did was for Tropical Storm Isaias. I sent out an email just warning everybody to you know, brace for the storm. I usually don't do the emails unless it's something really serious. But you know, subscribe to my website, you know, register for the forum, subscribe for the newsletter, and I'll notify you guys if there's any, you know, serious breaking news. And as always, thank you for your support. Thank you for your comments. I appreciate you guys very much. I enjoy reading your comments. I know sometimes I can't respond to all of them. You know, I'm a busy guy. I have a job, and I don't get paid to do this, you know, so you know, I have to still provide for my family, and you know, YouTube unfortunately doesn't pay the bills. So I try to do as best as I can to respond to your comments, but please don't take it personally if I don't respond. But I do try to read all of them as much as I can. So that's pretty much it for this video, guys. Take care, God bless, and don't forget the 3 Ps: prepare, practice, and persevere.